Welcome back to another episode of Off the Record with KyleSellsBiz, where I bring you experts from different backgrounds on business, entrepreneurship, mergers and acquisitions. And today we're going to talk about franchising, which is an awesome topic and something I'm very passionate about as well, being involved in the franchise space. So I have a good friend of mine from Long Island, and we was talking earlier about some of the artifacts and this background there, and that Metro card definitely means a lot. So I have in my youth, I admit, yes, I have jumped a couple turnstiles, go and get into college, but on my way to my college classes and so on. But man, Tom, it was a pleasure to have you on here. I mean, it's been I'm trying to think back how long it's been since we have known each other, man. It got to be, I don't know, maybe 10 years at least. I don't know. It's been a while.
I'm thinking 10 years. I'm thinking absolutely. I think I might have known you before you even had children.
Well, with that being said, my kids are 12 and 14, so that could be possible. Right. But I've definitely known you before you moved to Florida. I can say that much, right?
That's right. That is true. Yeah, we did some great meetings and roundtables with the New York Business Broker Association. It's just, a lot of good stuff. So I was just blessed to be able to be involved and meet people like you. I mean, you are a rock star in this world of business brokering, but so much more than that. That's just like a low level of stuff that you do. I'm just so impressed by all the certificates and mergers and acquisitions and all this great experience, knowledge, courses that you've taken. So congrats on all that. That's just amazing.
Well, life's a journey, right? And you never stop learning, right? And, like your journey as well, like this brought you to where you're at. And I've watched your journey and admired, your podcast. And, I've appreciated the opportunity to be a guest on your podcast. That's probably maybe 5 years ago, sometime back. That's a long, I don't know when you start doing your podcast, but you've been in this podcast game for a very, very long time. And when it comes to the franchise industry, you're definitely blazing the trail, sharing your knowledge, bringing on some fantastic guests. I don't know how many episodes are you up to now on your podcast?
It depends on how you want to define it. So There's about 300 episodes, but it started as a radio show on Long Island. And so a lot of those shows got uploaded as podcasts, but they weren't like quote unquote podcast.
Right.
But the podcast itself now, just as the Franchise Academy podcast, has been in existence since 2018. But I've been on the air since 2014.
So 5 years.
Well, 5 years for the podcast, for the radio show. Much longer than that. I think I had two different radio shows. I had a radio show in New York City at one point also. And that was like 2008, 2009, somewhere like that when I first started. So been a long time. I just love, helping people understand franchising. There's so many myths about it, but more than that, my passion and really my mission is to help people kind of get out of their comfort zone and realize that there's a lot more to life than just working a job and paying the bills. And
Tom, we're gonna get to that. I want, we know each other. We can have this conversation. We can talk about a lot of cool stuff for, God knows how long, but someone of, your stature and we chat, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and you're doing some great things in the franchise space. I think the folks that are tuning in to the live recording, the live podcast, it's funny, this is not technically, we could call it a podcast, right? But it's not technically a podcast. I'm just jumping on here and sharing some knowledge and having some cool guests like yourself on. But people need to know who you are. Right? You always assume folks know who Tom Scarda is, in Franchise Academy. But, so today we're talking about embracing uncertainty and license with a franchise veteran. We have Tom Scarda here. He's going to be sharing his insights on embracing uncertainty, pros and cons of franchising, and how to identify lucrative franchise opportunities. He's also going to offer his, his personal anecdotes up from his franchise journey. So who is Tom Scarda? So I'll give a little bit about who Tom is and what he's about. He's a certified franchise expert. He was the #1 producing franchisee with his first franchise concept. His second franchise was a flop, but we have had a lot of those, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but it kind of grooms you to who you are. You learn from those lessons, right? And the lessons that you learn from being successful is what makes him such an expert. Tom authored several books, including the #1 bestseller, Franchise Savvy. He hosts the Franchise Academy podcast and produced an online masterclass on investing in a franchise. He's also helped more than 1,600 people. That's 1,600. It's 16 with 2 zeros at the end. 1,600 people figure out if franchising is for them since 2005. And he's a franchise coach and advisor. So this is your official welcome to the Off the Record podcast with KyleSellsBiz, Tom. So I feel a little bit fulfilled having you on my podcast after you had me in yours. So we're balancing out things here, but it's a pleasure to have you on. Very humbled to have you on my show, talking about franchises. So you were talking a little bit about your journey. On my sessions, I like to humanize the segment. You can Google everything about franchising. You can learn. You could buy your books and so on. I think people like to hear about the struggles. That's how I got into my business. I didn't know anything about business brokerage. I was just like you, trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur, how to be a business person. And someone came to me and say, "Kyle, you ever heard about business brokerage?" I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, what's that all about? Right. And essentially helping sellers prepare to sell their business, increase their value, and find good buyers to an entrepreneurs to buy their business. And I was like, hey, I've been wanting to learn how to be a better business person. I might need to meet some of these business owners that want to exit, learn how they started, how they built their company, and also help other entrepreneurs. And I was in the mindset, hey, I've been trying to do this all my life. And if you can beat them, join them. And that's basically, what I did. So I invested in a company, and 20 years, it's our 20th year in business. So that's a route that I went. Had a short stint in the franchise space, in the UPS, to be more specific. My partner also has had multiple franchises in the Carvel ice cream franchises, and we have sold a couple of franchises. So that's done a little bit in franchises, but I want to have someone like yourself here to talk about your journey. What led you from being a New York City motorcycle underworld to become a franchise expert. So I know you have a very interesting background, all the stuff you've done, especially in this New York City subway system and so on. So I'll turn it over to you, Tom. Tell a little bit about your background, how you got into the franchise space.
Well, thanks. I mean, it is an honor to be on Off the Record with you. I have so much respect for what you're doing and how you help people and how you help business owners, just the evaluation service that you provide. I mean, it's just stupendous. For me, I always had sort of an entrepreneurial itch, but in my family growing up, we were very blue collar. My parents never said, go to college and get a college degree. What they said was get a city job and make sure it has a pension. And so at 23, actually 22 years old, I got into the transit authority as a subway conductor. So if you ever rode in the New York City subway, I was the guy opening and closing doors and making announcements. And I really loved being a cog in the wheel and moving, helping 5 million people a day get to work and get to their destination. But it wasn't really fulfilling my soul exactly. And so I have a creative spirit as well. And one day there was an old timer who actually was driving the train, the motorman or the train operator, they call it now. And he said to me, "Hey kid, this is a great job. You'll always have a shirt on your back." He said, "You'll never have a silk shirt, but at least you'll have a shirt." And I was like, man, that's like mediocrity. I mean, is that really what I want? And when I looked around at my bosses who I loved, and some I still stay in touch with, I mean, literally 20, 25 years later, they were not living the lifestyle I wanted to live. And as I looked around, I realized that business owners were. So I wanted to be a business owner. I didn't know how. I didn't know anything about business. I read some books. I attended some seminars, and I realized that a franchise is a business with training wheels. And that's what I needed. I needed somebody to hold my hand, show me the ropes. It's like a hands-on MBA program, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Truly is. And so I got in touch with a franchise consultant, this lady named Carol in New Jersey. We went through this long process of identifying my skill sets and what I like to do and what I hate to do as far as work goes. And then, bam, all of a sudden, she introduced me to something called Maui Wowie Smoothies. And back in 2000, right, 23 years ago, I bought this franchise. And everyone thought I was crazy, including my parents. My dad, who was a New York City police officer, he, in not so nice words, basically said, like, I'm an idiot for doing this. Why give up this pension for something called Maui Wowie? Are you kidding me? Like, everybody was freaking out.
Yeah, but back then smoothies wasn't that big of a trend. So I can see him like, what the hell is my son get into here?
That is so true. Back in 2000, it was more like a California thing. You know, it was like healthy. It was on trend in California. In New York, not so much. And my dad said, how are you going to sell frozen drinks in the winter in New York? That's just a stupid idea. And the funny thing is I ended up selling, in the time I had that business, I sold more in the wintertime than I did in the summertime, which is counterintuitive. It's like, how could that be? And the fact of the matter is, I had indoor locations, my main one being the Jacob Javits Convention Center in Manhattan. And they were like, hey, man, come in here, help us, do this concession thing. And lo and behold, it worked out really well. And we sold more in the winter than we did in the summer. In the summertime, we had a lot of competition. We did well, but there was a lot of competition. So my dad didn't really know what I was, really what was in my heart. He was just looking out for my best interest, of course. So we got into that business. I built it into 3 locations. And in 2005, I was blessed enough to be able to sell it and semi-retire at 41 years old.
Nice.
And it was hard work, don't get me wrong, and money is subjective. I wasn't making $1 million. I was a transit worker. So I didn't have a lot to replace. It wasn't $1 million salary that I was making at transit. But it was enough for me to kind of step back and kind of coast. And the funny thing is, as you mentioned earlier, in 2000, so my wife was a New York City police sergeant, and she was getting ready to retire in 2007. In 2006, she found this concept called Super Suppers, which looked phenomenal, right? You come to our location. We opened up a store in Bethpage in New York and Long Island. You come to our location, you make meals, follow our recipes, use our ingredients. You make meals in bulk, 6 or 12 at a time. Take them home, freeze them. On days when you're busy, the kid has soccer practice, the other kid has dance rehearsal. Yeah. Right? You throw one of these in the oven and you have a home-cooked meal in 20 or 30 minutes. It was brilliant. Even the New York Times said that we're changing the way America eats, the way McDonald's and Swanson TV dinners did 50 years earlier. I was like, wow, we're going to be like billionaires.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2 years, we were out of business and lost almost our entire life savings on that franchise.
Wow.
That's what made me a franchise expert, though, right? I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that, much more than I learned from the success in the first franchise.
Good point.
I wrote a book about it, Franchise Savvy, as you mentioned at the top of this broadcast. And it was really interesting because back then I was crying about it, obviously, losing a lot of money. But now I look at it as a blessing. I'm glad that it happened because then now I could talk to individuals and say, hey, you know what? Before you buy that silly franchise that you're thinking about, let me tell you a story about what happened to me. And it's not something that I read in a book. I lived it. And so I have, the scars.
Hey, Tom, can you share, because just what you said exactly, my conversation as well, when I first got into my space, I wanted to learn more about the failures. I want to learn like what not to do, because one mistake can bury you, right? That's a fabulous concept, right? I mean, I'm thinking about even today, I wish I could, have some food pre-cooked, frozen, and, take out when I'm ready to eat, right, at the house, as opposed to going and get, the grocery store has that PF Chang's. You have all these packaged meals and so on, that you can heat up. What happened with that concept, and why didn't kick off? Was it location? Was it the pricing? Was it like, what was the major issue there?
So it wasn't just one issue, but the main issue was that we were trying to change people's habits in eating, and unless you have a lot of time and money, that is really difficult to do. So what happened was a lot of people came at the beginning. It was a novelty. It's like, oh, let's check this out. But then it just became easier to, go to Stop and Shop or Kroger's or whatever and pick up a rotisserie chicken and a bag of salad and there's dinner.
Right.
It just was easier. So we weren't able to change people. So that was one thing. The other major thing is that there was no market for this. Like I couldn't do any research because it's never been done before. So how do I know that people are going to really want to do this? I mean, I talked to friends and family and everybody's like, oh yeah, sounds like a great idea. I would do that. And not even my friends and family came back a second and third time. So it becomes convenience. And so that was something. The other thing, if you're looking at a franchise, if we get down to some brass tacks of do's and don'ts in franchising, like don't get into something that's a brand new concept. And there's reasons why you might get into something if they owned a franchise before that company, now they're doing a second franchise and you're one of the first, that's different. If it's in an industry that's been done before. So that's another thing. So the franchise company, Super Suppers, who I hold nothing against, right? I made the choice to buy the business. They did their best. They had great recipes, but they were literally a culinary school. They weren't like a franchise. So we had great food. People love the food. We still make some of the recipes today.
How many units they had at the time?
I was the 100th to open.
Okay, so very early stage.
They sold like 300, but before they got everything open, the whole business collapsed, and then that industry collapsed. I mean, there's a handful around. I mean, literally, maybe there's 20 in the whole country of that concept. Super Suppers itself, I think it has maybe 1 or 2 stores, but they're not a franchise anymore. The franchise itself is gone.
Yeah.
In retrospect, we could have done it way differently. There's more mistakes that were made by the franchise company, but they were, as an example, they were in Fort Worth, Texas. That was their base. We were the first ones in New York, or at least in the New York metro area. And they said, oh, it's going to be $100,000 to open it. And it was almost double that. So that's a problem. And to be able to support us from Texas was difficult. And a lot of the recipes, like I remember the first month we opened, we would change 12 recipes every month, which is also bad for food costs, which is a whole nother story to tell. But we would change the recipes. But the first month we had fish tacos, which I love now. But in 2006, I never heard of fish tacos before.
Yeah.
And nor did my customers. We were stuck with about 40 pounds of cod. And like, what are you going to do with this cod? Unless we bring back that recipe again. It was just like, things like that. The food cost.
So a lot of different variables. And I mean, someone that's considering a franchise now, you can pull upon those past experiences and plus some experiences from other clients or customers you have served that went through similar situations. Let's talk about franchising in general, right? What are some of the common misconceptions? And I ask this because right now is a little bit of a trend where people are trying to become entrepreneurs through acquisition, right? I think, and it's funny, we were having this conversation, like, I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs reached out to me and say, Kyle, I want to become a business person or business owner, I want to buy a business and so on. And sometimes that's not for everyone, but a franchise essentially you have a blueprint that you can follow, right? There's a success, there's a track record, but even franchise is not for everyone, right? Because you have to operate within a certain box, right? A certain, certain system. And some people are more forward thinking and creative and want to think outside the box, right? So having your full autonomy as an independent business owner is good for some entrepreneurs, and having a system to follow may be good for others. So kind of talk a little bit about some of those misconceptions. And we do have some questions we're going to get to in the chat. And by the way, we are broadcasting Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. So we're going to watch the comments here, and we're going to make sure to get any questions answered throughout the broadcast. But Tom?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about franchising. The one biggest thing I hear a lot is, it costs $1 million to start. And that's absolutely not true. If you want to get into like McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts, yeah, it's $1 million. But there are so many so there's 4,000 franchises that span 90 different industries. So there's so many things. You could get into very low investment things that cost as much as a new luxury car. I mean, it's not that expensive, and you can get a loan for it. And Kyle and I, we have options. We have people you could go to get these loans. So that don't let that stop you. The other thing is, people feel like, as you mentioned, there's rules, regulations. I'm chained to the store all day. Totally not true. The rules and regulations are to keep the integrity of the franchise solvent. And it also helps the franchise make sure that everyone is in line. So what I mean is, if you say you buy a McDonald's and you don't like golden arches and you want to have purple arches, then don't buy the franchise. That's going to be a problem. You know what I mean? If you feel like, I was just talking to somebody the other day who wanted to get into a fitness concept, and she had deep conversations with the fitness people. And she's like, but I also want to bring in red light therapy, and I want to do cryotherapy and all these other things. And they're like, no, that's not what we do. So, okay, fine. Then don't buy this franchise.
Right.
If you want to sell fish tacos and you own McDonald's, it ain't going to happen,
Right.
And so it's those kind of things. But you'll also find the older the franchise, the more kind of rules and regulations there are. The younger franchises, they're kind of like grown, they're feeling their way through it, and there's more leadway. And like when I was in the smoothie concept, I was the 25th franchisee. I was able to put my fingerprint on the national concept by having them do certain things that I saw that were needed in New York, because they were based in Denver and Salt Lake City. So the East Coast thing, they didn't really know well. So I helped with that. So it's really interesting. I mean, I could go on and on about the myths and the misconceptions. A lot of people feel like I need to get into something that has to do with my hobby or my passion. That is the worst thing. If you're listening to this and there is nothing else you take away from this conversation, do not get infatuated with a franchise, and do not think that it has to be your hobby or passion. Because if you want to, I tell the story all the time, if you want to find something that has to do with golf because you love golf, I guarantee in 6 months, you're going to hate golf if you're trying to pay your mortgage with it. So now you have no business and you have no hobby either.
Interesting. I've never heard that before. That's interesting. No, I always hear people talk about, make profits, turn your passion into profits, right? I'm sure I've heard that before, right, Tom?
Yeah. And it happens, 1 in a million, famous Amos, things like that. Yeah. It does, we hear some of these stories, but the majority of times, especially in the franchise world, it doesn't work. And a great example is, a lot of times, like, you might know somebody who's a great baker, right? They bake all the cakes for the kids' birthday parties. They bring cakes and cookies to work all the time. And people are like, you should open up a bakery. And sometimes those people do. And then all of a sudden they realize that baking cakes and cookies is 10% of the business.
Yes.
It's everything else, the back office stuff. And
it's funny. That brings me to a book that you guys should read if you haven't read it already. It's called The E-Myth. Michael E. Gerber.
That's
right.
Correct.
So when it comes to business, you have the actual people that do the work. You have the management that actually supervises and if you're talking about food quality control and so on, making sure that the goods and services are delivered and the company is running. And then you have the owner of the business, the visionary. And each three of those categories, they just think differently, right? The CEO who owns a business is thinking profits, go, go, go. Let's make more cakes. Let's expand. Let's open a new location. Let's grow quick. And then the management is saying, well, slow it down. We have to train the people. We have to build out KPIs. We have to build a process. And then the folks actually making the cakes are saying, hey, you know what? I'm so great at making these cakes. I don't like how my boss and management runs this company. I can go out and start my own business. But it's funny, as an entrepreneur, it's like you have these three different levels of thinking, but you have your superpower in one of them. So to example, if you're an expert at baking cakes, that doesn't mean that you'll be good at running a factory or owning the factory, right? So you may have to bring in some other resources to make that possible.
And that's exactly right. So when you're looking at a franchise, great franchise companies want individuals from corporate America that have great skill sets because of their experience in corporate America. And they want them to transfer those skills and experience into a business.
Correct.
So whether, you could be a vegetarian and own a McDonald's if you do it correctly, the way you should do it as a business owner. Sometimes you'll hear work on the business, not in the business.
Yeah.
It's kind of what they mean. So
I can give you a joke about that in a second. Let you finish your point.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you own something like any business, you need to be the visionary, the CEO and the CFO, and then you hire people, and then that gives you time. And we could talk about, trading your time for money, and what I feel success in businesses personally is having time and money married together, and that's how you have a great life, and that's a great business. That's success in my book.
Definitely. So it's funny you mentioned that was a trigger for me. So when the vegetarian comment, because I don't know if you're aware, but I might have mentioned to you that I am vegan. So I went from vegetarian to I'm vegan, and I'm thinking about it. So I mean, I used to love chicken. I mean, shoot, I'll eat like a complete bucket of chicken at KFC. I mean, I would chow down some chicken in my days. The jerk chicken, the curry chicken. I'm from the Caribbean, so I love all that good stuff, man.
Amen. Yes, sir.
So my very first job, guess what my very first job I ever had in my life was?
Working at McDonald's, maybe.
KFC.
KFC. Follow your passion.
I was working at KFC. Well, a friend of mine owned, I don't know if it was a franchise at that time, I don't recall, but he was the owner of this particular KFC. He actually had two KFCs. And, I not too long came to the US, and I was going to college, and, it's my first of many jobs that I had. And I ate a lot of chicken at KFC to the point where I hated chicken. I just, at a certain point, like, how much chicken you're going to really eat, and then not too long after I stopped eating chicken. I went the vegetarian route. It was funny. I lasted probably 3 weeks of that job, by the way, before I quit. But, so let's get into some nuts and bolts, right? There's a lot of questions that I get. We used to dabble in the franchise space for a little bit. Now we have experts like yourself who we rely on. Let's talk about some nuts and bolts questions that we typically get. We can probably go fire. What do you call it? Fire. What do you call it?
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire, right? So one question that I get a lot is how much capital, you touch this a little bit, right? How much capital is typically required to invest in a franchise, and are there hidden costs? And you alluded to that early on where you talked about the franchise you were in that you thought was $100,000 and went to $200,000. What do you say?
So there's a couple of different things to talk about here. One is, as I said, 4,000 franchises.
Yeah.
I like to break it down into three categories for investment. So if you think about it this way, you have your large brick and mortar businesses that we all know, Panera Bread, Taco Bell, Ace Hardware, Applebee restaurants. These are big 10,000 square foot restaurants, big stores. They're going to range, $1 million to open it, and higher, like
Mm-hmm.
even 2 or 3 million. A lot of times you're building from the foundation up.
Correct.
So that's one category. I call that complex retail. The next category I'll call simple retail. These are the things that you'll see typically like in a strip mall or, on Main Street, USA. So these are small stores like a UPS store you mentioned earlier, a boutique gym, things along those, a sub shop, ice cream shop, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They range in price from about 200,000 to about 500,000. And then the third category is what I call service businesses, which are typically home based or they're warehouse with an office based, and they range. It varies. You can get as low as 50,000 all in.
Mm-hmm.
On the high end, I put it at about 175,
Mm-hmm.
200,000. And there's some that are more than that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you could get into some that have a lot of equipment or a lot of vehicles, and they could go to 400,000. But
Mm-hmm.
on average in that arena, you're talking like 125,000 on average to get into a great service business. The thing I like to say though is the amount of money you invest is not congruent to how much you could make. Many of these $100,000 investments make more than the $1 million investment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all because of the overhead is so great in the $1 million investment that they're making a very small margin, where in the service business, it's a huge margin, 2, 3, 4 times,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot less headaches. And so
What are the typical margins in and this is probably a difficult question to ask, because for example, when we were in the UPS business, like an air shipment, the margin that was like 60%, right? Compared to ground, which is in the 25 to 30% range in ground shipments. What a typical service business, what are the margins?
It's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
And it varies so much industry to industry. In some service businesses, it could be a 15% margin. I
Mm-hmm.
know of other industries that are clearing 60% to the bottom line for the owner.
Mm-hmm.
And they come with different pros and cons. And that's why we try to figure out somebody's personality and how they're going to fit in, what's their skill set, and what's their life look like, right? If you got small kids, as an example, you don't want to get into something that's going to be weekends and nights and all of
Right.
that kind of stuff, unless you don't like your family, which would be crazy. But I'm joking. But you got to really think about that. People don't think about
Mm-hmm.
what is my day going to look like, and that's
Right.
really super important.
So the myth essentially is that there is a franchise for almost any potential entrepreneur. Obviously, you have to have some savings and investments to start the franchise, and then there's some hidden costs, right? There's something that's called royalties. There's possibly some co-op marketing course. There's talk about some of the costs as opposed to the build out. What are some costs they should be aware of as a new
Let me
franchisee?
just share. Like I'm looking in the chat. A good old friend of mine who is the president of a company called Coolview. Mike Herrera is listening in. So thanks, Mike, for listening in. So this concept, Coolview, is essentially a B2B concept. They also do B2C. It's sub 100,000 all in. The margins are ridiculous, high. But it takes somebody who's willing to talk to people,
Right.
So if you're a wallflower and you don't like to talk to people, maybe you should look at something else that is just a back office type operation. But in like a Coolview type franchise, you could go in and you could you could easily replace your salary, if your average salary, 100,000. I mean, I can't talk numbers, that, but I mean, you could rock the world with that and change your entire life, have freedom and flexibility, be able to take vacation whenever you want. I mean, this is, first you build it. Don't get me wrong. It's not day one. You're going to build it for a year or two. And then
Right.
you have managers in place and you're able to buy your freedom. And it could even be on a personal level. Like if you hate to go to the dry cleaners and the car wash, you could hire somebody to do that because you have that money, because there's no ceiling on how much you could make in a business as opposed to trading your time for money in a job.
Correct.
So I'm going off on tangents
Well,
here. That question again, what was it?
well, I mean, one thing I shared, folks, is that the franchise works, but do you work, right? Just because you buy a franchise, that's not going to make you successful, right? You have to go out there and pound the streets, make phone calls, hire a salesperson do that for you. It's like you have to go out and work. A lot of people buy franchise and then feel, okay, well, I have this big franchise now. The franchise is going to bring me all the business and leads and so on. So that you have to go out, like any business, you have to go out and work.
So I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off because that kind of pings something for me. So
Sure.
Years ago, I signed up to go to a gym and I didn't get in shape. And I was like, why didn't I get in shape? And I was like, because I didn't do the work. It's like, just because you joined the gym doesn't mean you're going to get in shape. If you buy a
Right.
franchise, doesn't mean you're going to make money.
Correct.
So you got to actually show up and do the work. I also wanted to comment on the fees. So there's really, you said hidden fees. There's really no hidden fees. For the operation of the business, the Federal Trade Commission oversees franchising, and they mandate that every franchise has a franchise disclosure document. In that document, they have to list every single expense to open and every single expense it will take to run the business on a monthly basis. Where the little kind of costs come in that you don't realize is in construction build outs, in permitting. You might think like, oh, I could be in this area. And then you realize you can't open in that area because it's not slated for that type of business. You have to go to the other side of town and you're going to be paying a lot more rent. So there's those kind of costs that you just don't know that much about. But if you can find something that's not in the store, that's more of a service business, you avoid all of those kind of build out problems and with permitting and the like.
Good point. The other question I have is kind of tie into what kind of profits you can expect to make, and that's what I mean. You mentioned you have 4,000 franchises, right? So how do you select which one makes sense to me? There are some that cost over $1 million to invest in, and some you can start for as little as 50 grand. And each one has different benchmarks as far as profitability and ROI. How does one evaluate the profitability and potential ROI of a franchise?
So buying a franchise is the most, in my opinion, the most transparent investment that you could make. So what I mean by that is you have that franchise disclosure document. Also, if you work with somebody like me, we have you talk to the franchise owners that are existing in the system. And I have a sheet of 39 questions that you would ask somebody on one of these calls. I call it a validation call. And you ask all sorts of things about all the various departments within the franchise. And then you get down to the nitty gritty and say, how much do you make? Not everybody will answer that. And also you ask, now that you know that, you've been in it for a year, 10 years, whatever it is, would you do this again? And that is like the magic question. And they have nothing to gain by telling you, yes or no. They're going to tell you the truth, right? It's just you and them. The franchisor is not there. So it's transparent. As far as profitability goes, we come under the Federal Trade Commission rules and regulations, and I can't say buy this franchise because you'll make this much.
Correct.
But what I would ask somebody is like, all right, you're thinking about a franchise. Would you want something that costs $500,000 to open and you make $200,000 a year, or would you prefer something that costs $100,000 to open and you make $100,000 a year? Think it through. What would that look like for you? And typically, most people will say, well, give me the 100 for 100. And if I want to make 500, I could buy 5 and make 500.
Right.
that is the secret. That's the trick.
I got one question for you, and I want to go to the comments here, and we have a couple comments I'm scrolling through. So based on your experience, what are like the crucial attributes or skills a franchisee should possess, right? What makes up an aspiring entrepreneur, what they should possess as far as skills, background, experience to be successful in the franchise world?
Well, that's great. The first thing is coachability. You're being coached by the franchise company. So you got to
Right.
be coachable. You got to be willing to get out of your comfort zone. And that's what we were talking about. That's what this whole thing is really about, is the comfort zone. A comfort zone is a job. Getting outside your comfort zone is where magic happens. Everything that you want in your life is on the other side of fear. And people just get scared out of their wits to kind of take responsibility for their own livelihood, which is nuts. I really love the idea of doing something out of the box, because magic happens, and there's no formula to say, do A, B, C, and you're going to end up with this.
Mm-hmm.
There's no formula. You got to take a chance. You got to take a risk, and it's got to be a calculated risk. Don't do something stupid, but you want to, do the research, understand what it takes, talk to professionals like you, and understand what it takes. And you need a couple of bucks. Don't get me wrong. You can't do it with no money. A mentor of mine says, scared money don't make money. And that's true, right? You got to approach it from like, what am I willing to lose if it doesn't work out? Right. So you're not gonna bet the whole farm. My rule of thumb is never invest more than half of your net worth. And that's even a lot. You don't need to spend a lot to make a lot. You just need to find a really solid business with a great margin, things that people need, Amazon proof, recession resistant, pandemic resistant. In franchising, we have all of that, but you got to be willing to take a bet on yourself. And that's why I wrote this book, The Magic of Choosing Uncertainty, right? So the magic of choosing uncertainty is how to embrace change, manage fear, and live a fulfilled life. And the only way to do it is to do it, unfortunately.
Just like Nike said, right? Just do it. Just go out there and take action. I usually have 3 rules that I live by. Number 1, get educated. So whatever you're going to invest in or do as a career, profession, or no matter what it is, if you're going to learn a new sport, a new instrument, do research, learn everything that you need to know about that particular space. My second rule is, find someone that's already doing it, model them, learn from them. If it's opportunity for mentorship, coaching, build your network. You're going to need a support system. Folks are going to pull you up when you're down, and people that you're going to pull up when they're down, right? Building that support system. And 3, you just said it, take action. You just can't sit in the sidelines, right? They got to go out there, just do it and make it happen. So as we close things out, Tom, there are a couple comments here. So Keith mentioned about a Batteries Plus franchise. Are you familiar with that franchise? And maybe Keith probably connect with Tom offline. I just put Tom's information in the chat to reach out to Tom. He's asking any suggestions on the franchise that's currently struggling right now.
Yeah, definitely. And there's got to be reasons for that, but I would, I'd be open to talking to the person about it and showing them how they could kind of get out of that.
Awesome. We have Winnie. Appreciate your, and by the way, thank everyone that joined in here, right? We have Keith, we have Robert. Winnie says that discipline, the key to success. That is why franchise ownership should be the first business to enter to develop discipline that you need when starting your business from scratch. Mike gave you some accolades that you're a pro or some stuff. So Audrey Lewis, she's a current franchise owner. Any recommendations for someone who's considering selling a franchise?
Yeah. So there are 2 quick things you could do for free. One is you tell the franchise company that you want to sell for whatever reason. And so when somebody calls in and says, I'm looking for that franchise in that territory, they're like, oh, we got somebody who's selling. Make that match. The other thing is, hopefully you have a database of customers. Reach out to those customers first. Ask them hey, anybody interested in my business for whatever reason, I got to get out. But let's have a conversation. This might be a good business opportunity for you. Something you could do right away. And it's, it's free.
And my recommendation would be, you want to make sure you get your numbers in a row. You want to, like in our franchise that we had, we actually knew what the other franchises in our area did as far as performance goes. So, are you underperforming franchise? Are you average? Or are you above market, so to speak? So if you're going to be selling your franchise, remember, folks that are buying your franchise going to be comparing your business operation to other like businesses in your space. So you want to make sure you get your business operating at its full capacity, and start increasing that valuation for your franchise. But you could reach out to Tom, myself, if you want some more insight on selling a franchise. Let's see here. What else do we have? Okay, I think that's it there. So Tom, any takeaways? I know you have multiple books. Maybe we should probably post a link. I did put your information in the chat, but if you have a link where folks can get your book, it'd be great. And then your podcast. Talk about your podcast and any events you have coming up.
Yeah. So the website is thefranchiseacademy.com. So thefranchiseacademy.com, you could find the podcast on there. All the past episodes there. Of course, it's on every podcast platform. Also, the books are on there. On YouTube, I have about 200 videos that you could watch. I also have a program on how to buy a franchise that's available also on thefranchiseacademy.com. So it's all about getting submerged, really understanding the pros and cons. Like you said earlier, it's definitely not for everyone, but if you're looking for something to help you grow, something that, and I'm talking about grow personally, something to help you grow wealth, it's definitely there. There's also success stories in franchising where people started with one unit and now they're part owners of a baseball team. And they have hundreds of units. I mean, there's all sorts of things, but don't become infatuated with a concept because you love this or whatever, and stay away from trends. I don't think a trend is a good thing. Like, oh, we're all getting into yogurt now, and then now we're getting into these giant cookie things. And now, I mean, you're not going to send your kids through college with those kind of concepts.
That's why you're getting access to the franchise disclosure document, and is reviewing the past performance of the franchise. Have they been involved in any lawsuits? What's the typical franchisee make in that space? Like, you're doing your research, and that's why you need someone like Tom to reach out to, because he has a lot of experience. Like you said, it's like over 4,000 franchises, and Tom, I know you've been very humble, but I know your company is one of the top performing franchise organizations. So you've been doing some great things for the business community. One thing we didn't talk about, I don't know if you get involved in this, Tom, at all, but conversions, right? So you may, someone that's listening may have a really high performing business that's doing very well, and they have, a good track record. They may want to consider converting their business to a franchise model. I don't know if that's something that you do, and, something we could talk about real quickly as we close off.
Yeah, I mean, if the thing that comes to mind, there's several conversion franchises out there, like Mako, right? Better get Mako. So the automobile collision thing. So if you're an automobile collision shop, you could actually just call Mako, and they might buy the franchise, buy your business from you, turn it into a Mako, and then sell it.
Right.
So that's one way you can exit if you wanted to. Or the reason some people, like, I know that there's like a water restoration franchise, and some people have a private water restoration franchise, and they will buy the franchise, and it makes you say, why? And the why is for the marketing. The marketing is so dialed in. So you spend the money on the franchise fee, you change the name of your company, and then your customers are just calling you now.
Right. There's a lot of opportunity, and it would take having a discussion with Tom just to see what see what your options are. But hey, Tom, I couldn't thank you enough for this segment. I didn't get through all the stuff I wanted to talk about, but time definitely flies in the 45 minutes that we have here. But I appreciate you, and I appreciate our friendship and connection over the years, and congrats on all of your success. I'm looking forward to our continued relationship that we have between both of us. At some point, I'm going to Florida, right? I'm going to follow you down there at some point. But there's a lot of unfinished business here in New York, so.
Yep. I hear you. Well, great. I'm just grateful for being on the show and grateful for our relationship and our friendship. Thank you so much. And if I could help you or anyone listening, please reach out. No problem. My service is 100% free of charge anyway. So we could have a conversation and see what happens.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you all for joining. For those listening to the recording, I appreciate you guys tuning in as well. We'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Off the Record with KyleSellsBiz. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone listening. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks.